All right, well, hello and welcome everyone. I'm Lisa Sawsville. I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Coverts, Woodlands for Wildlife. We're a peer-to-peer organization that reaches out to landowners and others to educate them about sound forest management and wildlife stewardship. And this year we celebrate 40 years of outreach, empowering landowners and others with the knowledge and the tools and the community support to do good things on their land. And we're really excited to be celebrating with a party on September 21st. So mark your calendars. We'd love to have you join us. We also have our spring cooperator training coming up at the end of this month, and we have a few slots available. So if you or a neighbor that you know might be interested in learning more and really delving into some of these topics, we'd love to have you join us. Reach out to me at lisa@vtcoverts.org, visit our website, or type something in the chat, and I'll follow up with you. Another point is if you do enjoy our programs and would like to support Vermont Coverts, you can do so with a donation online at our website, www.vtcoverts.org. And that about does it. I did the housekeeping of keeping yourselves muted to limit background noise, so thank you for that. And today we welcome Noah Hoffman. He's the Invasive Species Coordinator with the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. Today he's going to share updates and management strategies for invasive plants and forest pests. Take it away, Noah.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for those of you that are joining us live. Appreciate the interest and engagement with this topic. That is, my full-time job, and I'm happy that this is being recorded to share more widely. So, just a quick sort of background on myself for those of you that were not at the part one of this series last month. As Lisa mentioned, I work for the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, and my title is Invasive Species Coordinator. It's pretty broad, and the reason for that is that my work touches on a lot of different invasive species related issues, and I work statewide. So a lot of my work has to do with managing invasives on state lands and collaborating with the state lands program. But because invasives don't respect those kinds of property boundaries, it's really important that I stay connected and coordinate with the public, with private landowners, with municipalities as well. So I kind of have a very sort of broad scope of topics that my job covers. And today, for this presentation, wanted to talk about a few things that are relevant right now, and that slide is still messed up, but I want to talk about some early detection plants. This is kind of a part two of that presentation, just to provide some background on some newer invasive plants that to be on the lookout for in the state. And then I want to just give an update on some of what we're doing in terms of managing invasive species on state lands. So some common woody invasives, as well as emerald ash borer and ash tree management, and some other forest pest updates if there is time. So moving into the first topic here, for those of you that were not with us last week, excuse me, I'm just getting it to close my door real quick. A quick background on early detection, rapid response. A lot of my work, well, not all, when it comes to invasive plants, tends to be on the left side of this graph, closer to the prevention and eradication and containment side of things, as opposed to the long-term management and protection of resources. Although a lot of my work has to do with managing ash and mitigating the impacts of emerald ash borer, which is much further to the right of this graph, because we have a widespread invasive species that we're looking at long-term management and protection of ash trees where possible. But if you look to the left, when we're talking about the introduction of a species or trying to prevent it from getting introduced, that's where we have, we're more able to, control or influence what's going on in the landscape at a lower cost. So that is sort of the reason for prioritizing these early detection and rapid response plants that really haven't gotten established yet, and they're right at Vermont's doorstep or minimally widespread. So in terms of what I do at my job, this map here represents an ongoing project that started last year. I work closely with the Agency of Agriculture and the plant health team, which regulates invasive plants. They decide what plants are listed and to what degree they're going to step in and intervene when when we find out about one of these invasive plant occurrences or infestations. We identified some high priority plants that are terrestrial invasives. And they're on this map here: kudzu, porcelainberry, swallowwort, stiltgrass, wineberry, tree of heaven, mile-a-minute, and giant hogweed. So this is a mixture of public and private land. There are probably more occurrences of these species that we're not aware of, but we're closely managing and monitoring these sites. So I want to just jump into a few of those species that you might be observing potentially. And I just wanted to bring your attention to the VT Invasives website because over here where it says make a difference on the lower right, if you just look at the homepage, there's an article that I put there about identification and reporting and management of some of these species that I'm talking about today. So there are also resources there online. Giant hogweed is the first one I want to talk a little bit about. This is one that we get reports of a lot, and thankfully they often tend to be other species like American cow parsnip, but they are very sort of similar looking species. So just a little bit of an introduction here to giant hogweed. It's native to southwestern Asia, and it's very rare in Vermont. There's only a handful of sites scattered throughout the state, and those few populations are being monitored and managed closely. So it looks a lot like other members of the carrot or parsley family, and there are several concerns about this plant. If you've heard about it, like a lot of you probably have, it presents a severe human health concern because of the toxic sap. This person in the lower left should probably be wearing something a little more over their face if they're right next to the plant like this. But also there's an ecological concern that I think sometimes is overlooked. And in riparian areas, like a sunny riverbank where this plant is likely to grow, it causes soil erosion because you have heavy shade along riverbanks, and it kind of shades out a lot of the lower growing herbaceous plants. And it can, similar to Japanese knotweed, you can have this vicious cycle where if you have a lot of this stuff growing densely along a riverbank, you don't have much else growing on the lower level, which causes soil erosion, which causes the spread of this plant. And identification, this is, I think some of the, when you see it up close, the size is quite remarkable. The stems are 2 to 4 inches thick, and they have these dark purplish blotches on them that are these big hollow stems, and it's really striking when you see them up close. And the leaves are compound, sharply lobed, very jagged looking. When they get bigger, they get to be 3 to 5 feet in diameter. And the thing is, this time of year, this is oopsie, sorry about that. This time of year is a time when you'd want to be really looking out for this plant. So the leaves and stems would not be as large yet. So looking at the northeast distribution of giant hogweed, very common in southern Ontario, parts of New England and New York State, parts of Quebec. Not very common here in the North Country of sort of northern Vermont, New Hampshire, Adirondacks region. So that's why we're closely keeping an eye on sites where we find it. Kind of already talked about the ecological and human health concerns, but I like this picture here because it shows the height of the plant, and which is quite quite something when you see it up close. Like I mentioned before, it looks a lot like American cow parsnip. The flower heads of American cow parsnip, much smaller and much flatter on the top. The giant hogweed has a more of a globe-shaped flower, so that helps with identification. Wild parsnip is yellow, and Queen Anne's lace is sort of this delicate, sort of multi-stemmed, smaller flower. So we do have a landowner who we've been working with, not actually managing the plant on their property, but just monitoring it and advising them on what to do. They've been digging up the roots. This is a great way to, if you have a smaller infestation, you can dig up the roots, and if you really keep after it and repeat that year after year, you can suppress the plant and stop it from flowering and stop it from growing. With similar to a lot of things, you want to try to remove the entire rootstock, which can be a difficult process. However, this plant tends to grow in moist, sunny areas where sometimes you have looser soil because of the moisture. And so sometimes digging up plants is a way to actually starve the rootstock, even if you're able to, even if there are some fragments still in there. However, sometimes you get to larger infestation. It's interesting in the UK, where this is a lot more widespread. Livestock appear to like grazing on young and tender hogweed plants. And like a lot of things, multiple years are required to manage, but yeah, apparently sheep and goats love it. So there are not a lot of concerns that they're spreading the plant. So it removes the above ground growth of the plant, which could weaken the plant by depleting the stored energy reserves. So kind of non-traditional, but more and more people are looking into interesting alternative ways to manage invasives without using chemicals. So this is one of them. And with a lot of, in terms of larger infestations, and this is certainly the management, technique we default to on state lands a lot of the time, because we don't have a lot of available manual labor, and we're trying to be as efficient as possible and effective. So we do a lot of contracting work and some chemical treatments ourselves. And so foliar spray methods using a pesticide with glyphosate or triclopyr is the most effective way to go. And it's really important to start a foliar spray application really early. So we're talking later this month to early June, when the leaves are actively growing, and then following that with another application in July or August for the plants that escape control from the previous herbicide application. Like with a lot of things, the main idea here is to prevent it from flowering, because spreading by seeds is one of the primary methods of spread. However, just a note of caution, special care should always be taken when using non-specific herbicides that contain glyphosate, because they kill basically every plant that they touch. Also, because this plant often grows near water, you need to use an appropriate formulation of glyphosate, a wetland-safe formulation with an aquatic area use label. So the Vermont Department of Agriculture has recommendations for that, as well as VP Invasives. Just wanted to talk, I think I mentioned this a little bit more, just a sort of a case study example of how we respond to giant hogweed. It was reported by a private landowner in Westford. The site visit revealed an extensive infested area where, 100 or more plants on 2 adjoining properties. And fortunately, those two landowners are working to manage it. But if you live anywhere near Westford, Essex, Vermont area, there's a potential for giant hogweed in that area. So I want to talk about Milominate. This is a very rare plant in Vermont, but I think it's just fascinating and something that kind of trying to control invasives can be an exhausting topic. And I think when, it can be interesting and kind of connect us to our greater community of concern when it comes to something that is a sort of early detection on a statewide level. So by reporting any of these plants that I'm talking about here today, you can really help your neighbors and landowners and public lands and things like that by hopefully getting to them early. So Milominate it's got some other common names, not something too many people know about around here. There are 2 known sites in Chittenden County. It is a member of the buckwheat family and has some similar lookalikes there. And one kind of hopeful note in terms of managing this plant is that it is an herbaceous annual plant, unlike many invasive vines. So it only reproduces by seed. However, those seeds are very seeds very prolifically, and they can remain viable for many years. So preventing this plant from spreading by seed is crucial to managing it. This is a really, when you see this plant, it's pretty remarkable and easy to identify once you get a good look at it. It has these red tinted vines, which have these little recurved barbs all over the stems and parts of the leaves, which help it to climb over adjacent structures and other vegetation. And it has this leaf that is this bright green, nearly perfectly triangular shape. And then it also has these little saucer shaped leaf structures on that they're called ochrae, and they encircle the stem at each node. So below the leaf, you see these little saucer shaped things. After it flowers, the flowers are not really they're kind of not remarkable, but when it fruits, you have these really dark blue, kind of indigo colored fruits that each contain a single seed. Milominate, when you look at the map, really different story in terms of the spread and distribution. I'm not sure. I'm sort of cautious to mention that seed is expanding its range due to warmer temperatures. There's a lot of research going on with how climate change is affecting invasive species spread and distribution. This is one of those species, though. It's coming from the mid-Atlantic and southern New England and becoming established up here for the first time. And luckily, there isn't much of it around yet. However, in places where it does get established, it is pretty prolific here. So it's able to form a dense mat of vegetation that just overtops and weighs down and shades out native herbaceous plants and even woody shrubs and potentially trees. It can grow. It's called Milominate because it can grow over 20 feet in a year. And when there's a lot of it, it can be quite heavy and injurious to trees. So that's what we're trying to prevent in this area. Like I said, it's part of the buckwheat family, and there are some other lookalikes. These again are on DT invasives as well. That if you're not used to looking at the plant yet, then it's easy to confuse it with other things. In terms of managing this, we've been managing it in two places here, and we've just been hand pulling it. If the soil is fairly moist and loose, you can pull this plant out. It's always a concern trying to get all the roots, but we've been working on this in two different sites, and we're doing this as early as in the season as possible, before flowers start to appear. And if there are no seeds on the plant, you can just leave them out to dry. Out in a driveway, anywhere where it can dry out and die. It doesn't reproduce vegetatively just by seed. So hand pulling is a really good method because it's an annual, and you can actually eradicate it if you don't have a lot of it. There are biological controls. There's a weevil that I think is being experimented with more in the mid-Atlantic, places like New Jersey and Maryland. It's approved. Private landowners can apply as well. There's a program in some states where private landowners can order these weevils and release them to deal with their myeloid infestation. Thankfully, we don't have anything of that nature here in the state, and I'd like to keep it that way. We haven't had to resort to this either yet, but for larger infestations, chemical treatment is definitely the way to go. This plant has the potential for pre-emergent treatment using pesticides with an active ingredient called pendimethalin that can actually prevent seeds from germinating and target plants in this family. So thankfully, something we don't have to think about too much yet. As I mentioned, this is Judy over here from the Department of Agriculture's plant health team, who I work closely with, and we're really working on getting slowing the spread of this species in 2 sites. We're also doing some work, just outreach and education work with residents in the city of Burlington, because that's one of the sites where we discovered this. So trying to get folks aware of it, handing out flyers, things like that. So making sure people know, like, wanted. If you see this plant, let us know. And the last one of these early detection species I want to talk about before moving on is wineberry. This is an interesting one because we're not quite sure how widespread it is. It's something that is popular in the horticultural trade and used. People eat it and enjoy it in recipes quite a bit. So kind of like Lisa mentioned at the outset here, some people might be even wineberry enthusiasts, but this plant is listed and regulated by the state as a designated plant pest because of its potential impacts on natural resources, on agriculture, as well as forestry. So just want to learn a little bit about this one today as well. Also, sometimes it's called dewberry in Japanese raspberry, native to Japan, Korea, and China. Rare observations. There are only 3 of the research grade observations on iNaturalist. We look at iNaturalist quite a bit and try to follow up those reports because not everyone knows about BT invasives, and iNaturalist people just report all kinds of things. And so sometimes we find out about sites through that. Like its close relatives in the rubus genus, like raspberries and blackberries. It's a member of the rose family. And this is a perennial shrub that grows a lot like a raspberry, where the first year you have a vegetative cane, and the second year you get this more woody cane that produces lateral branches and flowers and fruit and becomes more of a bush. So it grows a lot like many varieties of raspberry. One of the main difference is that the stems and the petioles below the leaves are covered in red thorns and fine prickly red hairs. So the stem looks a lot different than native raspberries and blackberries. The leaves are very similar. They're quite silvery white underneath, which is notable. And the flowers and seeds and fruits are similar to raspberry. They have these 5 white heart-shaped petals that are surrounded by 5 longer hairy green sepals. And those, when you see it flowering, it looks quite different from a raspberry. It's a little harder to kind of discern from a raspberry once the fruit appears. They're shiny red. They have hollow centers, a lot like a raspberry. Once they start to flower, but the stems you can identify them that way. So similar picture here where we have the sort of Pennsylvania, Jersey, southern New York, southern New England, with quite dense infestations there that impact areas like where you have forest disturbances and you're hoping for some regeneration of native species and like a successional trend where you might have raspberries that come in and help protect seedlings and protect native tree seedlings from deer browse and things like that. This is one of those early successional species that colonizes a disturbed area, and unfortunately, it just lasts. It perpetuates itself and shades out that forest regeneration that the native prickly plants help to protect. So that's really one of the big concerns with this. And when you see it in a area like I just described, it looks similar to raspberry, but if you inspect the stems carefully, you'll see those red, very fine red thorns and hairs. Again, similar lookalikes, and if you look at the stems, whether they're the first year herbaceous type of stem or the second year woody type of stem, they look quite different than wineberry. The wineberry fortunately does not have a vigorous underground root structure, so hand pulling is pretty effective with this plant. It is something that you don't have to despair over completely if you find it. It's also easy to spot in winter because of the hairy red stems like that. So repeated efforts over a few years are probably necessary because you're always going to have root fragments in there, like any kind of shrubby invasive that you're pulling out, but not a vigorous underground resprouting ability there. So there's hope for this one, and similar to other plants, when we get into a larger infested area, we do have to resort to chemicals as a non-selective foliar spray. Sometimes if a shrubby invasive like this can be controlled with a cut stem application. There's less pesticide drift in that case. You're just sort of dabbing stems and things like that. But typically that works where you don't have hundreds or even thousands of stems that you need to control. And again, water and riparian areas are definitely a concern for this one. So make sure to consult with a certified applicator and use wetland safe formulations of pesticides like glyphosate. So far, we have not had too many run-ins with this one yet, but it was reported last summer in nursery stock, which is seeming like maybe one of the main vectors of spread for this plant. So staff responded and just destroyed the plants on site, and we're always trying to sleuth out where things came from, what supplier, that sort of thing, so we can hopefully limit that for the future. So these are if you go to VT Invasives, like I mentioned at the outset, there's some more information on how to identify these early detection terrestrial species that we want reports on. And we have on VT Invasives, there's a report it page where you can report plants, insects and animals, tree diseases. This one would be in the upland plant section. I want to move on to just some other management that's going on, and just to talk about how we're prioritizing more common invasives on state lands, and talk about a little bit about what we're doing there too. I showed this graphic last time at part one of this series, but I thought it would be worth talking about again. Just because when it comes, we often, when we're talking about managing invasives, I think it's, we tend to want to just at least I do, get right into the technical details of okay, how to manage this specific plant. What type of how does it grow, the biology, and all these things are super important. But I think it also helps to zoom out a little bit and take a landscape view of your management and to think about not burning yourself out and being able to get the most results for your efforts, so that you don't burn out and just give up on it, or fall to despair, things like that. So this is just a sort of an approach that we take on managing our lands that the state of Vermont owns, that we want to maintain, not just for things like forestry, but for public enjoyment, recreation, things like that. So this graphic gives us our highest priority based on lowest density of infestation. So where there's an infestation of invasives, we're working kind of from the outside in. And the goal would be to eliminate small isolated infestations first and to contain that that more densely infested area. Sometimes there's not a lot we can do to actually eradicate it because that area might involve other neighboring landowners. There might be vectors of spread like transportation and things like that are just really hard to control. So we try to attack things from the lower outlying areas first. And as you work inwards, you're kind of advancing on the perimeter of core infestations as sort of a second stage. And then getting to the core is where you're trying to suppress that interior area and stop it from spreading. But this really does take the highest level of commitment and is often frustrating if you go for the core, most densely infested area first. So, you got to think about your capacity, what you're capable of, and really just kind of psychologically being able to see some positive results. It helps you keep going, I think. And this is another way to flip that graphic, and I like this. This came from some research that was being done in urban Toronto. And so what you're looking at here is a map of urban Toronto. And I know that we're not talking, most of us don't live in dense urban areas, but I think this graphic can be instructive to help us think about our overall approach. So, what this map shows is an area, urban Toronto, and the hot spots or the red spots are an attempt to prioritize ecosystem functioning and ecosystem services to help guide the treatment of pale swallowwort, which is an early detection species here in Vermont. Not a lot of it, but it's very common in southern Ontario. So this geospatial map, fancy map that you're seeing in the upper right, very sophisticated. This is something like grad students probably worked on. It's not something we're going to be doing. But I just show this because I think the point here is that they identified hotspots based on biodiversity and ecosystem services like recreation. And I think that's important for us too, as landowners, as people who might be, volunteering, working in the community. We want to focus on places to treat that have some value for us, whether it's a area where we like to sit, garden, or it has some, forestry value to us. It might be a forest stand where we're trying to protect regeneration. We want to have some timber value and some good stewardship, for generations maybe. So identifying your good stuff first is basically what this comes down to. What do you want to protect? What do you want to protect, as opposed to just focusing on the pest? I think when we just try to manage the pest, we can lose sight of the overall landscape and what we're trying to protect. So it's just an instructive graphic. rather than kind of going back to this one, rather than just thinking about the pest, thinking about, well, what areas do we want to focus on for treatment? So that's something that we do on state lands, and I think it can be applied to sort of any scale, whether it's just your backyard or a few 100-acre woodlot. So it's a similar focus where we're focusing on those outliers, that kind of early detection, lower infestation area, but we're thinking about this more on a parcel basis instead of thinking about it statewide, zooming into your land, your community, your property, your forest, something like that. So for smaller infestations, what we do, we have seasonal staff here, so we have a little bit of human power. So we will go out and look for those sort of high priority areas. And where you have smaller infestations, you can actually do manual and hand pulling. So up there in the upper right, we have a whole library of weed wrenches here that we use for our management. We use we take advantage of school groups and UVM students as well. So up in the Robbins Mountain Wildlife Management Area forest roads in Richmond, there we have invasives like, sort of the typical woody invasives, honeysuckle, barberry, buckthorn, and where we have old forest roads and where honestly in the past we have maybe been our own vectors of spread because equipment has gone up there and moved things around. And we want to clean up our mess and keep an eye on those places so we don't have invasives kind of getting into our sort of high priority parts of the forested landscape. So we've also in southern Vermont state parks, areas that people visit, and then UVM woods, we've also been using school groups and other volunteers to just pull invasives. I don't, if you've ever use a weed wrench, hand pulled honeysuckle. They have amazing root systems, and you're always going to leave root fragments. So we have sites that we revisit year after year, and we're gradually lowering the density of invasive shrubs in those areas. Where we have larger infestations, we are relying on systemic herbicides like glyphosate. And in general, we really try to avoid foliar sprays where we might have pesticide drift, and then also, health concerns, to the person applicating. So we do a lot of cut stump treatments when we can. There's the Honey Hollow Trail area in Camel's Hump State Forest, if you're familiar with that area. Also in the Lake Willoughby State Forest, we've done some of these treatments. So in Honey Hollow, we've been doing cut stump treatment on honeysuckle, barberry, and buckthorn because we have a pretty, we kind of have more of a core, a dense infestation there. Thinking back to that earlier graphic, we're getting more into the orange or the red zone of not just an outlier, but we got a lot of these things here. So one thing, what we'll do is we will sort of apply multiple methods. So we'll go in, we'll use a weed wrench to pull the largest and most obvious plants that we can find. These woody invasives, we pull them and then we hang them in trees so that the root mass is exposed to the elements, it dries out, and keeping it off the ground, and that will kill the plant. So, if you're in any of these areas, or if you've ever done this yourself, you might have lots and lots of woody invasive shrubs hanging from low branches, because we're really talking about a large amount of vegetation. And so we'll do that, and thinking about an integrated pest management approach using different methods. We'll pull what we can, and then we'll look for resprouting or places that we've missed. We'll hand pull again, and then after a couple of years of doing that, we've identified individual plants or areas that are just really vigorous, and where our manual methods are just not putting as much of a dent in it as we would like. And so then that's where we start thinking about cautiously applying chemicals. So cut stump with something. I mean, I guess I'm probably not supposed to, promote any specific brands, but this is what most people call a buckthorn blaster. It's a dauber where you have the herbicide containing glyphosate or triclopyr, systemic herbicide in the bottle, and then there is a felt tip at the end. And what we do is mix a little bit of blue dye in there so that when we have applied the herbicide to the stump, this will, kind of notify, let us know, hey, we've covered that one. Also, if there's any spillage or anything like that, we can say, oh boy, I'm dripping here. I might be not hitting my target. So it really helps to this method helps you isolate the treatment area and helps you to see what you've treated, what you haven't, and if there's any spillage or anything like that you need to be concerned about. So this is a treatment we would do, just to clarify, in the fall, because after hand pulling, after trying to, get into the infestation as best we can, when we do this in the fall, that's the time when, the energy and things are flowing down into the root system of the plant. And so that's what we want the herbicide to do, is to travel down into the root system as well. And one of the reasons we use pretty much exclusively glyphosate as the active ingredient in our herbicide treatments in the state of Vermont is because it's the safest. It has little to no soil activity. So when it gets down into the roots of the plant, it isn't transported by water and soil throughout the soil and getting into the groundwater. Still, it is an herbicide and it's toxic. So we try to be extremely careful with it. I wanted to give a little update on some of our insects and tree pests. I'll probably talk about what we're doing with emerald ash borer, and that will be pretty much it for time. A lot of my work has to do with managing emerald ash borer and also managing ash trees. So this could probably be a whole other workshop, more in depth on this stuff that I'm sure I'll talk to Lisa about some point. But I just wanted to, without getting into too much about emerald ash borer that I'm sure people are fairly familiar with on this call, wanted to talk a little bit about our 2025 observations so far. We're seeing an increase in damage and tree mortality. And one of the ways we track the spread of EAB is by how many towns in the state have reported it, and where our staff has confirmed that yes, indeed, it's there. So we have 15 new towns in the state of Vermont with new detections of emerald ash borer already this year. And just to compare that to previous years, we had 32 total last year, and we only had 15 in 2023. So this doesn't necessarily mean that emerald ash borer is spreading more rapidly than it was before. It probably means that we are noticing it, the damage and mortality more. Chances are that it already was in those places, but it hadn't reproduced as much yet. It was in lower numbers, and therefore its effects on ash trees were not as significant. And now with the recent winter, we're seeing woodpeckers flecking off bark to get at the larva, and people are just reporting it at a much faster rate than in years past. So, like I said, not necessarily meaning that the pest is spreading faster, but that the impact on our ash trees is certainly greater, and we're going to be seeing more of that. So we do trapping and different. These maps are just of sites where our staff, we actually have we have traps and lures out, so we can find out about where EAB is as soon as possible. But we also rely a lot on public reporting through VT Invasive. So even though if emerald ash borer seems like old news, we always want to know about new infestations. So just to kind of give an update on what our map looks like, To the left here, this is called our heat map. It indicates this 10-mile radius area of the infestation. So the red is the hot spots. This is where we have more dense emerald ash borer and more advanced decline and mortality of ash trees. Just the southern Vermont here has gotten a lot more hot in the past year or two. It was pale yellow last year, and we're getting more into the orange red zone here. So this is certainly cause for concern and just something we want to raise awareness about when people are thinking about how to manage their ash trees. One thing we're working on state lands, and that people on private lands and other nonprofits like Vermont Land Trust and others are working on is protecting some ash. So we're kind of using some of the prioritization models that I've talked about today to focus on ecologically sensitive areas like rich northern hardwood sites, black ash, red maple swamps, and public areas where ash trees are kind of iconic maybe and add to recreational value, where you might have ash near structures, near trailheads and things like that. And when they decline and decay, they're going to be quite a bit more costly to remove than treating them. Another thing that I just want to raise awareness of is we are also treating not just individual trees to kind of retain like a single tree that we love, but in places where there are forest disturbances, like where there might be logging on state lands. Sort of logging on state lands is a contentious issue for some people, but there are commercial timber harvests that happen on state lands where we have a 1/4 acre to a 1/2 acre clearing that's resulted of a group selection. And those canopy gaps are ideal for regenerating ash trees, and white ash in particular. So one thing we're doing is treating groups of male and female reproductively sufficient trees near those canopy gaps so that we can protect reproducing trees, so that we can end up with ash seedlings and saplings in those canopy gaps, in those openings where they have a lot of light and they can grow into larger sapling and full-size trees and adult trees. So we're treating trees for a number of years. That will help protect them from EAB as well as reduce the EAB density, because you never know when once the wave of EAB has passed through, and it's probably never. EAB is never going to go away, but there will probably come a time where we have a lot less of it, where it's sort of the predator-prey cycle of ash and EAB has kind of lulled. So there is really hope that ash will remain in our forests in the future. Not nearly as much of it, but that's one of the things we are working on promoting. So yeah, we're doing chemical control. We're using tree injections. Where we use there are 2 chemicals listed on here. Emamectin benzoate is the one that is most effective, and that we are focusing on. Again, there are tree services that do this, that requires certified pesticide applicator. But I just wanted to kind of let people know that we're doing this not just to protect a tree in our yard or something like that, but also to protect patches of trees for future regeneration, actually in forest stands. We also are working on some seed saving. Black ash is a species that's very rare and has high cultural value to indigenous groups and people who do basket weaving, who are all non-indigenous as well. So we have a project where we're working on saving seeds from female black ash trees. So if there are people, in private landowners who have black ash trees with and they're female trees that produce seed, we would love to know about those. We don't really have a mechanism for doing that other than just send me an email or give me a call if you want to support something like that, to basically save seeds, and then there's a method where we dry them and preserve them, and we send them to a lab. There's a few different labs, and where those seeds are being used to propagate black ash and do research, so that in the post emerald ash borer world, there's going to be we want to preserve some genetic diversity so that we can potentially restore black ash on the landscape. Let's see. We're also doing biocontrol. This is something that not a lot of people in the public know about, and some people have concerns about, so I just thought it would be worth mentioning. We release parasitoid wasps that impact the emerald ash borer. These are, and when I say parasitoid, what I mean is they focus only on, they're parasitic, but they focus only on the emerald ash borer insect. They don't predate on anything else. They're adapted just for emerald ash borer. And so it is non-native. It's they're from Asia, so we're releasing a non-native insect to deal with a non-native pest, which is what a lot of biocontrol is. And also just to sort of clarify, wasps, they don't sting. They're actually very tiny. And so we're releasing these in some strategic areas so these wasps will prey on emerald ash borer and reduce the density of emerald ash borer. They won't eradicate it, but they protect regeneration. So ash seedlings and saplings that are really not the targets of emerald ash borer. The emerald ash borer likes the adult trees. In places where we have good ash regeneration, we're reducing emerald ash borer populations with these parasitoid insects, and to protect natural regeneration of ash in forests. So just wanted to let folks know about some of the work that we're doing there. We've got a little bit of time for questions, and so I just wanted to leave some time for that as well. I'm going to skip to a slide here that has my email. It has the FPR website where you can find out fprvermont.gov, where you can find out about, we have monthly updates that focus on invasive plants that just, I do like an invasive plant of the month and a write-up with identification, biology, and management information, other updates about forest health. We have an annual forest health update that you can find on fprvermont.gov that will actually be getting published soon, or our last year's update. btinvasives.org has a lot of the, the terrestrial plant identification and management information that I mentioned, more recent sources there, and my email. I'm always happy to respond to questions, concerns, comments, inquiries from the public. So it's 12:59. I didn't get to cover everything, but I think I covered at least some of the main points I wanted to. So like I said, hopefully Lisa and I will be talking about doing something more with an emerald ash borer and ash management workshop potentially later this year, potentially in person. So keep an eye out for that. And Lisa, I'll kind of turn it over to you. It's 1 o'clock, but I can hang on for a few minutes if people have questions or anything they want to bring up.
That sounds great, Noah. Thank you so much, and thanks for the spoiler alert. About EAB. Would definitely work on that and make it happen.
Yeah.
So, any questions, you can type them in the chat. I will say, this is great because these are things we're watching for. We don't want them to get their roots in here in Vermont and be prolific like some of the ones we're already dealing with. If you have invasives on your property and you're dealing with them, now is the time to think about mapping them. They're going to be the first ones to green up this time of year, and be able for you to kind of be like, oh, here they are, and map them. And then you can think about that strategy that Noah shared of where do I want to start, or what do I want to start with? And just pick one thing. It's you can see these are new ones coming, and we have so many that are here. This can be overwhelming, but we can make inroads on our own individual properties if we take action. So, we have some invasive recordings online. We'll have some in-person programming. We have some peer-to-peer. What are your neighbors doing? Because if you're doing stuff on your property, it's great if you can showcase and share with them what you're doing. So maybe they can take a little bit of action on their property at the same time. And we've seen that really, really happen and take effect and make a difference. So I encourage you to do that as well.
Yeah. And I, uh, I, you know, I'm a licensed pesticide applicator, and so chemical treatment is something that I'm involved with because of my work in the state. And I just sort of want to say that I'm not a proponent of any one particular method. I think an integrated pest management approach is the way to go, and especially if you're working with a neighboring landowner and you have a real sort of if you're mapping things out now, like you said, Lisa, and looking at, okay, what's greening up, the phenology of invasive plants. The reason they're so competitive is that they're doing their thing often earlier in the spring and later in the fall than other plants are, and it's a really good time to uh, identify them. So focusing on those outliers where you can do more manual mechanical removal can be really encouraging. And then when you sort of start thinking about, okay, well, what about this dense area? You can kind of that's when you might want to explore something like hiring a licensed pesticide applicator, doing some chemical treatment if that's something you're interested in. And so it really helps to sort of work your way in and map things out earlier on. I completely agree. I saw something in the chat here that
There is. So Art wants to know how hopeful you are about EAB treatments because he feels it seems that it's a losing battle where he is in Pennsylvania.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because this is my full-time work, my sort of the bar that I've set for success is quite different than what a lot of people would consider, success or failure. So what we're really trying to do in terms of the ash work that I described is retain some ash on the landscape. We're not hopeful that we're going to get rid of EAB, and we are not hopeful that we will be able to keep ash on the landscape anywhere near it's not going to be a component of northern hardwood forests or those rich northern hardwood forests. Other species like basswood and red oak and things like that are going to take its place. We're just hopeful that we can retain some of it and preserve some genetic diversity. So in general, I'd say the answer is no. We're not hopeful that we're going to really get rid of the EAB, but we're hopeful that some ash, if that some ash can be retained. So I think the more sort of practical approach is thinking about moving forward and thinking about how to manage a forest post ash. So thinking about things like if you have a lot of ash and you're going to have large canopy gaps when the ash decay, paying attention to vectors of invasive plant spread. So managing invasive plants where you're going to have forest openings so that you can encourage native regeneration of other species, that are like high quality, northern hardwood species. So I think this is sort of getting into that other workshop a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of my sort of multifaceted answer for now.
All right, it looks like we're just over one and
Yep.
answered the questions that have been posed to this point.
Mhm.
Noah, thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time.
Yep. I also just wanted there's one person who had a DIY with herbicide. Glyphosate is less commonly available, unfortunately, and that you are correct that triclopyr is more mobile in soil. It doesn't seem to have the same negative headlines as glyphosate because people are not using it as frequently. But triclopyr, is extreme caution should be used because it is more mobile in soil and water, and there are no wetland or riparian safe versions of triclopyr. So just wanted to clarify that you are correct. And glyphosate is less commonly available. And unfortunately, in order to get it, it's a Class A pesticide in many places. You may need to hire someone and in many locations you can't DIY with glyphosate. So just wanted to kind of affirm that chat comment there.
Okay, so that makes a question for me. If glyphosate is no longer the active ingredient in Roundup, what is?
I'm not totally sure. We use rodeo almost primarily. And I know it really depends on where you live, whether or not you can get it for DIY stuff. So, yeah, I'd have to check that out. Unfortunately, off the shelf pesticides are not necessarily safer than the Class A registered pesticides. A wetland safe formulation of rodeo with glyphosate as the primary active ingredient is a really good chemical in terms of protecting the environment where you're applying it. And Roundup might have triclopyr and other chemicals in it that are much more toxic and unsafe to use near water and in the soil. So I'm the licensed applicator. I'm not I'm not necessarily an authority on this stuff, but it is a little strange that the stuff that a licensed person like myself uses might be a safer product than what you can get at Lowe's. So that's just a weird thing about our world.
All right. Well, thanks, Noah. And everybody, good luck as we enter spring and you're looking at the next management strategies for your woodlands. And as I said, we have openings, just a few in our spring training. So if anybody's interested, please let me know. And we wish everybody a great rest of your week. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.